Do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law. Okay, so I've decided to discuss a topic that seems a little confusing to most people. I once had a pagan friend of mine mention one time she was confronted on her pagan beliefs by a Christian. This Christian said to her, well, if you claim not to be a Satanist, then what is the true meaning of the Baphomet? Or something to that liking. To which she claimed she didn't have an answer. I myself have found the idea of Baphomet is one that's kept somewhat in the dark, and very few have an even basic understanding of the meaning of the symbol of the sabbatic goat and its implications on various traditions. So I've done a little investigation into the etymology of Baphomet, as well as the places this figure's turned up in history. So let's start with our current image of Baphomet. You've likely seen this image somewhere before. This is the sabbatic goat of Alphonse Louis Constant, better known as Elvis Levy. You can see his signature there at the bottom of the picture. He put this as the front piece in his book, Dogma et Rituel de la Haute Magie. Excuse my horrible French accent. This was later translated by A.E. Waite and given the title Transcendental Magic. Levy comments in his book on the front piece as follows. The goat on the front piece carries the sign of the pentagram on the forehead, the one point at the top, a symbol of light, his two hands forming the sign of occultism, the one pointing up at the white moon of Chesed, and the other pointing down at the black one of Geburah. This sign expresses the perfect harmony of mercy with justice. His one arm is female, the other male, like the ones of the androgyny of Kunarath, the attributes of which we had to unite with those of our goat because he is one and the same symbol. The flame of intelligence shining between his horns is the magic light of the universal balance, the image of the soul elevated above matter, as the flame, whilst being tied to matter, shines above it. The beast's head expresses the horror of the sinner, whose material acting, solely responsible part has to bear the punishment exclusively, because the soul is insensitive, according to its nature, and can only suffer when it materializes. The rod, standing instead of the genitals, symbolizes eternal life. The body, covered with scales, the water. The semicircle, above the atmosphere, the feathers, flowing above the volatile. Humanity is represented by the two breasts and the androgyny arms of the Sphinx of the occult sciences. I love this quote because when I investigated further into the image, I came across many of the same symbols that compose this image in many different cultures. So let's investigate further. I'm going to talk now about the word Baphomet itself, and where the name may possibly come from, its background and etymology. Another important person you may come across when researching Baphomet is a writer named Idries Shah. In his book, The Sufis, he puts forth a theory that the name Baphomet was a corruption of the Arabic word Abu Fahamat, which literally translates to the father of understanding, or the father of wisdom. Father actually referring to a source, not necessarily to a male. We'll get back to that when I get onto the topic of the Templars and their involvement with the sun. Shah also suggests it may come from the Sufi term Ras al-Famat, which literally translates to the head of knowledge. Again, there's legends of the Templars, in fact, worshipping a head. We'll get back to that again later. Right now, let's discuss the word given the various languages and cultures that this image may have traveled through or come in contact with, and possibly cultures that may have influenced what has become the modern image of Baphomet. We've already discussed the possible pre-Islamic Arabic influence on the word, but it may also have its origins in the Greek words bathe, meaning to baptize, and metis, meaning measurement or mathematics. These two words together, Baphometus, could be literally translated as baptized in the wisdom of measurement or mathematics. Now we know what the Greek mystery schools pretty much invented, sacred geometry, and fueled most of the modern mathematics we learn in school, like Pythagoras and such. Pythagoras is also fabled as starting the first secret society in the West, and was also very fond of the pentagram. We already understand, by reading Levy, that the pentagram is an important symbol in the Baphomet image. But I will be doing a future video on the mystical properties of the pentagram, so stay tuned for that. But for right now, I'd like to focus strictly on the image of Baphomet and the word in its meaning. So, next, we have from the Egyptian language 3 words, when put together, also create a similar concept. These are Ba, meaning the soul or the immortal aspect of a person, Fa, meaning to lift or to carry, and Mat, meaning order and justice, Mat being also the goddess of justice. Therefore, the Egyptian Ba, Fa, Mat could be literally translated as lifting the soul towards justice and truth, reminding me again of Levy's quote. Now, Levy also points to the Egyptian origins of the Sabbatic goat as the goat of Mendes, which has been equated with the ram of Amun-Ra. But there's another Egyptian figure we must take into consideration here, and that is Benebjedet, who was worshipped mainly in Lower Egypt, and his cult was centered in Mendes, depicted as having a goat's face and legs. His name has been translated as being composed as Ba, as I've already explained, the soul, and Jed, which means Lord. He was considered then the soul of the Lord, or the soul of Osiris. Benebjedet was also the consort of the fish goddess Hatmahet, who was the original goddess of the Mendes area. She was often later associated with Isis, the Earth Mother, and therefore Benebjedet, being the soul of Osiris, and Hamahet, being synonymous with Isis, Benebjedet was considered the father of Horus, and the 3 made up what was called the Mendesian Triad. In one myth, Benebjedet was asked by the divine tribunal to be the judge between Horus and Set, to see which would take the throne of the gods. He then consults Neith, or Nuit, and asks for her wisdom. In this myth, Benebjedet suggests that Set be given the throne, since he's the older of the 2 brothers. We can find similar themes in Hindu mythology as well. The god Daksha, one of the sons of Brahma, born of his right thumb. He had many daughters. One of his daughters, named Shakti, was set on marrying Shiva, the destroyer. Daksha did not approve. In one myth, he decides to hold a holy horse sacrifice ceremony to the god Vishnu, and invited all the gods and all the sages, except Shiva. Shakti, so ashamed by this, took her own life. Shiva, now enraged by the loss of his wife, crashed the party and maimed most of the gods and sages. He then proceeded to rip Daksha's head off, and replace it with a goat, after which Daksha became one of Shiva's most devout followers. Now, let's get back to the etymology of the word for a second. Schoenfield showed that by applying the name Baphomet to the Hebrew Atbash, we set up the characters as follows. Switching the first letter with the last, and the second with the second last, until you've completely reversed the alphabet, as shown here. Using this system, we can then switch the letters Beit, Pei, Vav, Mem, Tav, with Shin, Vav, Pei, Yod, Aleph. This spells Sophia, the Greek goddess of wisdom, also fabled to have a connection with the Templar worship. Also sounds very close to the word Sufi, Sophia, as we've already discussed their influence on the word Baphomet. Plutarch actually equated Sophia with the Egyptian Isis. Which is actually starting to demonstrate a bit of that mother-father aspect. Sophia still shows up in our modern English in the word philosophy, for example. Philia, Sophia, or the lover of wisdom. Philia being love or infatuation, and Sophia being wisdom. The Templars quite likely had contact with Sufism while they were in the Holy Land, and if the legends of Solomon's Temple have any truth to them, then there was a treasure of texts and artifacts discovered by the Templars that changed their entire view of religion and ritual. Idris Shah also says in his book The Sufis that the Templars' stronghold in Jerusalem, the site of their foundation, was finally overrun by the Muslims in 1244. 33 years later, the victorious Sultan, Baybars, inspected their castle and is recorded to have discovered inside the tower a great idol, in whose protection the castle had been placed. According to the Frank who had given it its name, apparently which is an unreadable word made in diacritic letters, he ordered this to be destroyed in a mihrab, or a Muslim prayer niche, constructed in its place. Shah continues to say also that based upon the idol's description as a demon having a very fierce-looking face and beard, the idol very likely could have been Asmodeus, the demon guardian who helped Solomon build his temple. Michael Howard claims that Levi based his illustration on a gargoyle that appears on a building once owned by the Templars, the commandery of Saint Brie-le-Vineux. As we all know, gargoyles were used by the Templar churches as demon guardians that protected the building. I gotta say, that raised my eyebrows a little bit. Sean Martin says, the indictment, or acte d'accusation, published by the court of Rome, set forth that in all the provinces they, meaning the Templars, had idols, that is to say, heads, some of which had 3 faces, others but 1. Sometimes it was a human skull, and in their assemblies, and especially in their grand chapters, they worshipped the idol as a god, as their savior, saying that this head could save them, that it bestowed on the order all its wealth, made the trees flower, and the plants of the earth to sprout forth. Now, Forrest Jackson says in his book, The Baphomet in History and Symbolism, we found indisputable evidence for the charge of secret ceremonies involving a head of some kind. Indeed, the existence of such a head proved to be one of the dominant themes running through the Inquisition's records. Among the confiscated goods of the Paris preceptory, a reliquary in the shape of a woman's head was found. It was hinged on top and contained what appeared to have been relics of a peculiar kind. So it's very possible that while the Templars were in the Middle East, they absorbed much of the theology and religion of the area, in turn fostering a new age of enlightenment for Europe. The knowledge the Templars brought back from the Middle East must have been significant, since over the centuries the Templars were in power, the continent slowly realized that there was knowledge before the Bible, and ancient peoples weren't primitives, even though the Templars were eventually wiped out or pushed underground by the Catholic Church. The seed of wisdom was already planted, and Europe eventually found its way to a Renaissance. Thinkers started studying the classical Greek and Roman concepts again, and once again started mapping the heavens. Wisdom had found its way back into the Western world, and I really feel that the Templars had a lot to do with that. I personally believe that they worshipped wisdom as a principle. Any confessions we read interrogated out of these people by the Inquisition or what have you obviously isn't any good. Usually, since the accuser told you your crime and then tortured you until you admitted to it. The fact that no one really knows what really happened with the Templars shows that the Church cooked up a number of crimes that they were guilty of, and the confessions of these knights don't coincide with one another. But anyway, they worshipped wisdom as a principle. Therefore, in my opinion, they understood the true mysticism of Christianity. Even though they were burned as heretics, they understood Gnosis. The heads or statues were simply symbols of this abstract concept. So some say it's a head, 3 heads, a goat head, the head of St. John, a statue of a goat person. They're all just symbols of the same idea, adapted and modified by different chapters to serve as an egregore for that group. It's a focal point for their thoughts. It's the principles a man follows, not his beliefs, that lead him to wisdom. When the Church stomped out the Templars, they almost completely obliterated any mystical integrity Christianity may have had. Luckily for us, there's been Gnostic discoveries since that have helped Gnosis re-manifest in our world. The Nag Hammadi scripts, for example. I've also tried to investigate the Baphomet's connection with Freemasonry, since there's a rumor of the connection of the Freemasons with the Templars. But I've found this with little avail. I've not been able to find any proof that the Freemasons do even recognize Baphomet to any degree. In fact, I've read a few articles written by Scottish Rite Masons that deny the image has anything to do with Freemasonry. However, I found this section in an Encyclopedia of Freemasonry and its kindred sciences by Albert G. Mackey, MD, 33rd degree, which really adds up what I've said already. So there it is. I'm not going to read out the entire quote for you guys, because pretty much the first half of it there is pretty much stuff I've already talked about from other sources, which was really cool when I found this, that other sources were already saying these things. An idea that it does mention, which I have highlighted here, that I haven't mentioned so far, and I will read this part. Others again have thought that they could find in Baphomet a corruption of Mahomet, and since they have asserted that the Templars had been perverted on their religious faith by the Saracens, with whom they had so much intercourse, sometimes as foes and sometimes as friends. Nicolai, who wrote an essay on the accusations brought against the Templars, published at Berlin in 1782, supposes, but doubtingly, that the figure of the Baphomet, figura Baphometi, which was depicted on a bust representing the Creator, was nothing else but the Pythagorean pentagon, the symbol of health and prosperity, borrowed by the Templars from the Gnostics, who in turn had obtained it from the school of Pythagoras. The king, in his learned work on the Gnostics, think that the Baphomet may have been a symbol of the Manichaeans, with whose widespreading heresy in the Middle Ages he does not doubt that a large portion of the inspiring spirits of the temple had been intoxicated. Amid these conflicting views, all merely speculative, it will not be uncharitable or unreasonable to suggest that the Baphomet, or the skull of the ancient Templars, was like the relic of their modern Masonic representatives, simply an impressive symbol teaching the lessons of morality, and that the later has really been derived from the former. Now, as I've stated, Levy's book was translated by Waite. This image of Baphomet was obviously an influence on Waite's tarot, even though it was supposed to employ the symbolism of the Golden Dawn tarot. It's likely the most widely used tarot deck to date. In fact, many will correct me on its name, claiming that it's the Pamela Coleman Smith tarot, to help show her influence on the cards as well, since she was apparently the artist that drew them. But anyway, the Devil card shows this symbol clearly, as we can see here. You'll notice the downward pointing pentagram rather than the upward one usually depicted in Levy's drawing of Baphomet. Levy stated that the goat of Mendes arranged with such a pentagram was meant as a contrast to the one with the upward pentagram, that one representing the microscopic man. But he didn't include in his work an actual image of the goat with the averse pentagram. The first real record of this image appearing with the averse pentagram in Guaita's book La Clef de la Magie Noire in 1897, written slightly before Waite's time. Waite's description of the card can be found in the pictorial key of the tarot. Some significant segments are as follows. Part 1. The veil and its symbols. The devil. In the 18th century, this card seems to have been rather a symbol of merely animal impudicity. Except for the fantastic headdress, the chief figure is entirely naked. He has bat-like wings, and the hands and feet represent the claws of a bird. In the right hand there is a scepter, terminating in a sign which has been thought to represent fire. The figure as a whole is not particularly evil. It has no tail. And the commentators, who have said that the claws are those of a harpy, have spoken at random. There is no better ground for the alternative suggestion that they are eagle's claws. Attached by a cord, descending from their collars, to the pedestal on which the figure is mounted, are two small demons, presumably male and female. These are tailed, but not winged. Since 1856, the influence of Eliphas Levi and his doctrine of occultism has changed the face of this card, and it now appears as a pseudo-Baphometic figure with the head of the goat and a great torch between the horns. It is seated instead of erect, and in place of the generative organs there is a hermetic catechus. In Littero Divinatoire of Papus, the small demons are represented by naked human beings, male and female, who are yoked to each other. The author may be facilitated on this improved symbolism. Part 2. The doctrine behind the veil. The design is an accommodation, mean or harmony, between several motives mentioned in the first part. The horned goat of Mendes, with wings like those of a bat, is standing on an altar. At the pit of the stomach there is the sign of Mercury. His right hand is upraised and extended, being the reverse of that benediction which is given by the Hierophant in the fifth card. In his left hand there is a great flaming torch, inverted towards the earth. A reverse pentagram on the forehead. There is a ring in front of the altar, from which two chains are carried to the necks of two figures, male and female. These are analogous with those of the fifth card, as if Adam and Eve after the fall, whereof is the chain and fatality of the material life. The figures are tailed, to signify their animal nature, and there is human intelligence in the faces. But he who is exalted above them is not to be their master forever. Even now he is also a bondsman, sustained by the evil that is in him, and blind to the liberty of service, with more than his usual derision of the arts, which he pretended to respect and interpret as a master therein. Eliphas Levi affirms that the Baphometic figure is occult science and magic. Another commentator says that in the divine world it signifies predestination. But there is no correspondence in that world with the things which below are of the brute. What it does signify is the dweller on the threshold, without the mystical garden, when those are driven forth therefrom who have eaten of the forbidden fruit. Next I would like to discuss the Devil card in the Crowley Thoth deck, since I will next speak about Crowley and his connection with Baphomet afterwards. But right now, we still have some tarot investigation to do. I'm going to show you a picture of the card, Crowley's section from the Book of Thoth, in my opinion, the richest book on tarot ever written. This card is attributed to the letter Aeon, which means an eye, and it refers to Capricornus in the zodiac. In the dark ages of Christianity, it was completely misunderstood. Eliphas Levi studied it very deeply because of its connection with ceremonial magic, his favorite subject, and he redrew it, identifying it with Baphomet, the ass-headed idol of the Knights of the Temple. But at this time, archaeological research had not gone very far, and the nature of Baphomet was not fully understood. At least, he succeeded in identifying the goat portrayed upon the card with Pan. On the Tree of Life, Atu 13 and Atu 15 are symmetrically placed. They lead from Tiferet, the human consciousness, to the spheres in which thought, on the one hand, and bliss, on the other, are developed. Between them, Atu 14 leads similarly to the sphere which formulates existence. These three cards may therefore be summed up as a hieroglyph of the process by which ideas manifest as form. This card represents creative energy in its most material form. In the zodiac, Capricornus occupies the zenith. It is the most exalted of the signs. It is the goat leaping with lust upon the summits of earth. The sign is ruled by Saturn, who makes for selfhood and perpetuity. In this sign, Mars is exalted, showing in its best form the fiery, material energy of creation. The card represents Pangenitor, the all-begetter. It is the tree of life as seen against a background of exquisitely tenuous, complex, and fantastic forms of madness, the divine madness of spring, already foreseen in the meditative madness of winter, for the sun turns northward on entering the sun. The roots of the tree are made transparent in order to show the innumerable leapings of the sap. Before it stands the Himalayan goat, with an eye in the center of its forehead, representing the god Pan, upon the highest and most secret mountain of the earth. His creative energy is veiled in the symbol of the wand of the chief adept, crowned with the winged globe and the twin serpents of Horus and Osiris. Hear me, Lord of the stars, for thee have I worshipped ever, with stains and sorrows and scars, with joyful, joyful endeavor. Hear me, O lily-white goat, crisp as the thickest of thorns, with a collar of gold for thy throat, a scarlet bow for thy horns. The sign of Capricornus is rough, harsh, dark, even blind. The impulse to create, no account of reason, custom, or foresight. It is divinely unscrupulous, sublimely careless of result. Thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that, and no other shall say nay. For pure will, unassuaged of purpose, delivered from the lust of result, is every way perfect. It is further to be remarked that the trunk of the tree pierces the heavens. Above it is indicated the ring of the body of Nuit. Similarly, the shaft of the wand goes down indefinitely to the center of the earth. If I lift up my head, I and my Nuit are one. If I droop down mine head and shoot forth venom, then is rapture of the earth, and I and the earth are one. The formula of this card is then the complete appreciation of all existing things. He rejoices in the rugged and the barren, no less than the smooth and the fertile. All things equally exalt him. He represents the finding of ecstasy in every phenomenon, however naturally repugnant. He transcends all limitations. He is Pan. He is all. It is important to notice some other correspondences. The three vowel consonants of the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph, Yod, Ayin. These three letters form the sacred name of God, I-A-O. These three, Atu 9, 0, and 15, thus offer a threefold explanation of the male creative energy. But this card especially represents the masculine energy at its most masculine. Saturn, the ruler, is Set, the ass-headed god of the Egyptian deserts. He is the god of the south. The name refers to all gods containing these consonants, such as Shaitan or Satan. Essential to the symbolism are the surroundings, barren places, essential high places. The cult of the mountain is an exact parallel. The Old Testament is full of attacks upon kings who celebrated worship in high places. This, although Zion itself was a mountain, this feeling persisted even to the days of the witches' Sabbath, held if possible on a desolate summit, but if none were available, at least in a wild spot, uncontaminated by the artfulness of men. Note that Shabbatai, the sphere of Saturn, is the Sabbath, historically. The animus against witches pertains to the fear of the Jews, whose rites, supplanted by the Christian form of magic, had become mysterious and terrible. Panic suggested that Christian children were stolen, sacrificed, and eaten. the belief persists to this day. In every symbol of this card there is an allusion to the highest things and the most remote. Even the horns of the goat are spiral to represent the movement of the all-pervading energy. Zoroaster defines God as having a spiral force. Compare the more recent, if less profound writings of Einstein. I'd lastly like to talk about Crowley's relationship with the image of Baphomet. I've already read for you his explanation of the Devil card given in the Book of Thoth. Crowley took on the magical title of Baphomet once he reached the 10th degree of the OTO. Also, he identified himself with the image and explains it in many of his writings. I'd like to read a few of those for you now. Firstly, I'll read from Magic and Theory and Practice, Chapter 21, Part 2. The devil does not exist. It is a false name invented by the Black Brothers to imply a unity in their ignorant muddle of dispersions. A devil who had unity would be a god. Now, the more important part of this quote is actually its footnote, which is actually quite extensive compared to the quote itself, so I'll read the footnote for you now. The devil is historically the god of any people that one personally dislikes. This has led to so much confusion of thought that the beast 666 has preferred to let names stand as they are, and to proclaim simply that Ivas, the solar phallic hermetic Lucifer, is his own holy guardian angel, and the devil, Satan or Hadit, the supreme soul behind Ra-Hoor-Khuit, the sun, the lord of our particular unit of the starry universe. This serpent, Satan, is not the enemy of man, but he who made gods of our race. Knowing good and evil, he bade, know thyself, and taught initiation. He is the devil of the Book of Thoth, and his emblem is Baphomet, the androgyny, who is the hieroglyph of arcane perfection. The number of his Atu is 15, which is Yod-He, the monogram of the eternal, the Father one with the Mother, the virgin seed one with the all-containing space. He is therefore life and love. But moreover, his letter is Ayin, the eye, so that he is light. And his zodiacal image is Capricornus, that leaping goat whose attribute is liberty. Note that the Jehovah of the Hebrews is etymologically connected with Iao and the sun. So is Jesus. The fundamental antithesis, the classical example of such antinomy, one which has led to such disastrous misunderstandings, is that between Nu and Had, north and south, Jesus and John. The subject is too abstruse and complicated to be discussed in detail here. The student should consult the writings of Sir R. Payne Knight, General Forlong, Gerald Massey, and Faber Delavet, etc., etc., for the data on which these considerations are ultimately based. Nextly, from the Equinox of the Gods, Chapter 7. This one I'll put up for you guys. Now, in the tarot, the trump illustrating the letter Shin is an old form of the stele of revealing, Nuith with Shu and Seb. The pantacle, or magical picture of the old Aeon, as Nuit with Hadit and Ra-Hoor-Khuit is the new. The number of this trump is 20. It is called the Angel, the messenger from heaven of the new world. The trump giving the picture of T is called Strength. Tav is called Strength. It shows the Scarlet Woman, Babylon, riding or conjoined with me, the Beast, and this card is my special card, for I am Baphomet, the Lion and the Serpent, and 666, the full number of the Sun. The magical numbers of the Sun are according to tradition. 6 times 6 equals 36, and 666 divided by 111 and epsilon, 1 minus 36, equals 666. I believe this passage especially shows the reasoning why perhaps Crowley identified himself with Baphomet as his magical title in his 10th degree. Also, you can see by much of Crowley's work that he identified himself much with this image. These are merely 2 examples. There's much more. But I'm going to wrap this up. So that's my investigation of the meaning of Baphomet. If any of you out there have any further input on sources I may have overlooked, or arguments against any of my points, feel free to either comment or message me personally. Also, if you guys like my videos, please feel free to press that subscribe button. 93, and blessed be. Love is the law. Love under will.